We have Avalabs head of engineering, Patrick O'Grady, on In the CLOB today. Patrick, welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, like you were saying, you got me all warmed up. I was in a podcast right before this and really excited to join you guys. So,
welcome to the party, my friend. Thanks for joining, and we truly appreciate your time. We know that you're one of the absolute most key people behind the crazy speed with which Avalabs is shipping stuff. So welcome to the show.
Definitely. Just trying my best. Yeah, thanks for having me. It's really a team effort. I'm really excited with everyone, the community outside and inside of Avalabs. That's really takes Avalanche on their own. Really is excited to contribute to it. So
definitely, man. Our chat is very excited for you to be here today. We've already had this is going to be a great show a couple times. So very excited to get into the nuts and bolts. You know what I mean?
Yeah. How can I help? What do you want to talk about?
First of all, welcome. Patrick, Patrick is the head of engineering at Avalabs, like I said before. And if you wouldn't mind, whenever we welcome a new guest to the show, I like to get a tad little bit of background. So if you wouldn't mind telling us a little bit about where you come from and your own background, we'd love to hear it.
Yeah, sure. So sorry, just trying to do not disturb everything to make sure I don't get pinged here. So I'm Patrick O'Grady. I've been at Avalabs for about 2 years now. Prior to that, I was at Coinbase for about 2 years, working on the crypto engineering team there. So while I was there, I worked on a project called Rosetta, which is an open source standard for reading and writing to different blockchains. Through that, got to meet a bunch of awesome teams and builders in crypto in general that were integrating with Rosetta and everything with Coinbase. And so had a blast there. And, eventually just got sucked into wanting to build on a different layer, which was the layer below. And I think Coinbase serves a really awesome and important role, especially with all the exchange issues people have had lately, which is having this regulated US-based financial institution that can help people get into crypto. And so I thought it was a great experience working there. But at the end of the day, I think of it as a stepping stone to what hopefully is a much more crypto native world. And so, really joined Avalanche, because I thought I had formed pretty clear opinions of what I thought were important for blockchains when I left Coinbase. And Avalanche checked those boxes. And I can go into that in a bit, but prior to that, I was at Stanford. I don't have a PhD or anything fancy like that, just computer science, engineering. But for me, that was a big step coming from the Midwest, in Wisconsin, where let's just say blockchain wasn't super talked about back when I left Wisconsin, but learned a lot in California and really got into it. I always I have a 21 miner, one of those Bitcoin ASIC web servers.
One of the real OGs. There we go.
I keep on my desk as a reminder of kind of the technical journey of that we've all taken here. In
that deserves an air horn.
So I mean. I have a funny sort of parallel to that. I have 4 or 5 Raspberry Pi 4s in my closet with special heat dissipating cases on which I ran Avalanche nodes in the early days. I'm not going to say who, but our guest next week helped me tremendously get those things up, because in the very early days there were some very there were some unusual things I had to do to the hardware, boot from USB rather than a memory card. There were a lot of things, and the software worked, right? As long as you did the right things, it worked. So amazing, man. Welcome to the show.
I think, funny enough, small world, I think I saw some of those videos early on of talking about how you actually would run it on a Raspberry Pi.
Yeah. So that video
still at Coinbase,
that video was, I'm gonna say, ominously taken down. All the videos are still on the Avalanche YouTube channel. For anybody who doesn't know, the tutorials, early days tutorials, when I was 25 years younger, if you look at those videos, are still on there. And the Raspberry Pi 4 video is taken down because I think as soon as Pangolin launched, there was so much demand that tiny piece of hardware with 1500 megahertz CPU and 4 gig RAM just can't do it.
So the interesting thing there is that there will, I think, there should be a reprise of that, which is running the Avalanche Lite client of basically, which is a thing we released recently, which just lets you kind of run the consensus without actually verifying or executing the blocks. would be, I think, a really cool rerun of that, which is a way that you could still run a Raspberry Pi on the network for some useful purpose, maybe not to secure the network, but for your own sake of running some kind
Look
of
at Patrick.
API.
He's showing up to the show for the first time. He already gave me a bunch of homework. Like, there goes my goddamn weekends, bro. Now I gotta like dust off the old Raspberry Pis, reboot them, upgrade them, and run them. But absolutely,
hey, I'm always down to help people find more work to do.
100%.
Never been my problem.
This is not work. This is a hobby and a passion. That's what I'm.
Well, we're gonna find these videos. I mean, you guys heard it here first. You heard the Firestorm baby picture alpha. It still exists on the internet. All right, so
yeah, it's true.
It's out there.
It's on the Avalanche. I was like 3 or 4 out of the top 5 videos in the early days of Avalanche were these tutorial videos, because I had like a virtual machine one, a Raspberry Pi 4 one, like how to manage your nodes remotely stuff. There were like tips and tricks, stuff that I figured out on my own to manage those things. Good days, man. I remember.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Firestorm, but didn't our producer of this stream actually help you with those videos too?
All 100% of all those videos were produced by our current producer at Dexalot. So
we're all coming full circle. Look at this. Look at this.
The history in Avalanche.
It's like a family reunion over here. You know,
it's like the Spider-Man meme of like everyone.
Yes,
it always was though.
I think the thing that caused those videos to be taken down was at one point Kevin realized, hey, people are running Raspberry Pi 4's nodes, like people are running nodes on toasters, and they shut it down. But I think like at this point, there were a bunch of upgrades since then where non-performing nodes are benched or they're separated, right? So there's a lot of features that even if the node isn't performing, yes, it's a bad thing for you, but at least the network is not going to get affected like it did originally back in the day, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's I think one of the things that really enables us to move quickly on the engineering side is just the raw ingestion of metrics across a number of different nodes. Like if you've looked at the metrics endpoint on an Avalanche Go node, you'll be bombarded with like 5,000 metrics of every kind. And, when you're trying to build something reliable and performant, metrics are critical. And so with a lot of those, events and stories through the growth of the network, having clear data to indicate, everything that's going on is critical to actually improving and, trying to help the ecosystem out. And so for the nodes that we at least have visibility into, we collect, 5,000 metrics every couple seconds and then store that data to analyze in bulk. And so, I think that in that story in particular, we could see large portions of the network that were, when there were surges of traffic, their response time, went up quite a bit. Naturally. Yeah. And so finding ways to better convey that to people was important. Yeah.
Don't run this stuff on toasters. Great. Very nice, concise way of saying it. But I mean, like it speaks volumes to you guys being able to deliver stuff quickly. Now, in that vein, I actually have a couple questions. So like I said, this is the third time I'm saying you guys deliver a lot of things, right? Like a lot of blockchains out there had very grand plans about delivering a lot of the features that you guys delivered day one, and you're continuing to deliver stuff. Obviously, a good portion of the open source code you picked up, but then you built a lot of things on top. Do you mind, from the technical CTO perspective, giving the high level items that are critical to you and your roadmap for the next year? Because I'm not going to lie, I'm one of the guys that is following, and I think I have enough technical knowledge to understand most. Even I can't keep up with all the key things that you guys are planning to deliver. So giving a high level to our audience would be very valuable.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's complex because I think you're really asking about the platform particular roadmap too, but like there are other teams at Avalabs as well working on core, working on the explorers, working on, all sorts of API stuff, right? Like, there's a lot going on outside of just the platform, but it's in the goal of not sitting here for a few hours going through everything. We'll keep it mostly the platform layer. And 2023 for Avalanche, at least for Avalabs contributions to it, is really about the custom VM story. So for most people launching subnets today, you're using the EVM. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, very common, a lot of tooling. People really just want to deploy Solidity smart contracts for many people. But is that the perfect runtime for many applications? Maybe not necessarily. Like I think that there are different trade-offs people want with programming flexibility and different trade-offs that you can make in terms of like how state is managed. Like, there's, the list goes on forever. And I did a podcast previously where I talked about for an hour just different trade-offs in virtual machine design. But if you're going to build your own custom virtual machine on Avalanche right now, there's not a lot of help, right? Like you can look at what the subnet EVM does, but that's a lot. That's going from like 0 to 1,000. And then we have a few tutorials of like, I think I built the Spaces virtual machine that's still running that people kind of mess around with. Funny enough, it's the biggest subnet on testnet, still at 31 validators or something like that. That was an example, but that took you from like 0 to maybe like 0.2. Like it wasn't really a generic framework for building blockchains. It was like you could fork that and maybe make some tweaks to it or something like that. Sure. Very soon, I'm going to release our first proof of concept SDK for actually building blockchains from scratch, using a lot of the Avalanche native things that we've built. People talk about us originally being like a Geth fork or like something like that or whatever. And while it's true that the C chain contains a lot of code from Go Ethereum, and huge credit to that community and team for putting together something that people find so interesting. We read a ton of other code completely unrelated to that on networking, consensus, virtual machine runtime, everything like that. But most people don't know that because the virtual machines we have that run on it are not particularly interesting, right? Like they do what they need to do, like the P chain. But it's not like they're pushing the envelope of what's possible on a blockchain. And so the SDK we're putting out is an opinionated way to build high throughput blockchains, but in a way where it still gives you a lot of the flexibility to develop that specifically. So like if you wanted to, have a different smart contract framework, you could implement it on top of this. If instead you just wanted to have like a super transfer optimized subnet, you could do that. So a lot of what we're doing in 2023 is making that journey much easier and much more powerful, such that I hope by the end of the year, most of the interesting stuff is happening there and not necessarily on top of the EVM. And so Avalanche itself, I think needs to grow a bit, and the direction it will grow, I don't think is going to be deeper into the EVM. It'll be becoming better clarifying its kind of its journey as a unique blockchain and a platform of platforms. So the hope is to empower that to continue. But there's a lot of other stuff going on with making AWM easier to use. Like it's not actually running on most subnets. Most subnets don't really use elastic subnets, so there's like a whole step there, and then better connectivity between the primary network and subnets in general. So should keep us busy for at least a month or two.
No, I mean a month or two, guys. Very underemphasized statement. After all that, the last comment was this will keep us for a couple months.
In jest, yeah, just to be clear with everybody. In jest.
Right. So one thing I just want to resonate at the back of what you said. Obviously, I probably should spend as little time talking as possible, but Dexalot is currently running an EVM-based subnet, which gives us high transactions per second. Transactions per second matters less from a Dexalot perspective. It allows us to have enough orders per second to run the exchange. However, the way I think and conceptualize this is we have an engine that is a generic engine. You can put it into any car and it will still work in any car type thing. However, if you want to customize it so that you optimize for more orders, lower fees, better tolerance on spikes, right? Because trading typically is very spiky, bursty behavior. Powell goes out, he speaks, today he did, you see a giant spike down, right? We're going to want to customize it with a custom VM. So obviously, Patrick, you and your team have been helping us tremendously along our journey with respect to the subnet. We appreciate that. I guess I think it's safe to say that we'll be knocking more on your door as we go down the rabbit hole that custom VMs are. But we're definitely looking forward to the new tooling that you're planning to put out.
Yeah, I think the hope is that, and the reason really for doing this SDK is that that's really the bottleneck right now. Is a lot of people knocking on our door asking like, like, cool, like I listen to the podcast, look at the docs, like I get it, super cool, but like how do I actually do that? And then, you know, we have to have a lot of like one-on-one conversations talking
Absolutely.
about, you know, the things to do and not to do. And so the hope is that this SDK codifies that so that we don't really have to
You
have
scale
those
better.
conversations.
You're going to scale better, right?
Well, I mean,
conversation.
I'm a very, like from a scaling perspective, very pessimistic that the way to scale is people. Like the way to scale is better employing technology. And the joke I always look back to is like when Instagram sold to Facebook, there were like 6 people there. When like WhatsApp sold to Facebook, there was like 22 people there.
Right.
Like there are ways to grow output without being a people function. And so the way that we'll grow, I don't think is going to be like the community in general is not to just employ like 1,000 people that run around to teach you how to use virtual machines. Instead, they become so straightforward that it's apparent to most engineers. So that's really what my focus is in 2023 in particular.
Amazing, man. Amazing. Now, there was another thing that you just mentioned. You said that obviously Avalanche and you as a team used code that is extremely valuable from the Go Ethereum community. First of all, I don't even understand why anybody would complain that their code is being used and why anybody would refuse to pick up code that's added on top. That's amazing. In my opinion, the consensus for Avalanche is, again, doesn't exist anywhere else, right? Why not reuse it? But anyway, separate question. Do you see, particularly AWM, obviously last Friday when Gun was on his All Access show, he mentioned AWM is VM agnostic. Do you actually see other blockchains? Obviously, subnets are going to use it, but do you envision anybody else picking up this technology and integrating it? And the reason why I asked this question is if they did, does that mean Avalanche VM subnets or C-chain can connect to other blockchains using this technology?
Yeah. So first point I want to touch on is the Go Ethereum component of it. Like, I think like the frustration with open source projects that borrow and share code is more so that the people that like use it or something like that claim to do things or like promise to do things that the original contributors do not think is possible, or they claim that they're the reason why like the code that they took is useless. We just added something that made it useful.
Sure.
So
okay,
like I think it's just being clear about attribution and like where the importance of contributorship comes from. So like, you know, the EVM runtime is not a thing we've done or really contributed to in any major way other than just some precompiles, right? So like that should be very clear to people. And I think that team has had a lot of crazy ideas with how to improve state management and everything like that that I think are super interesting. So I think it's just important for people in that position that they are recognized for what they're doing and that people don't claim that like, oh, you know, they couldn't figure it out, but we could. Like it's just kind of crazy. So I know a number of those people personally, and they're fantastic.
Fully agreed.
Yeah. On the point of AWM, which is, you know, the real part of the question, I just think open source contributorship is super important. And I want to just emphasize how important I think that is. But from a AWM perspective, it's very highly optimized for use within Avalanche, right? So like the messages of AWM are raw bytes, right? So you can put anything there, but we don't include a bunch of information about the message that is like decipherable necessarily by another blockchain, right? So we include on a message who signed it, like the node IDs, right? Well, if I pass this multi-signature, the node IDs that signed it and the message to Bitcoin, they're not gonna give a fuck, right? Like it doesn't make any sense to them, right? And so, you know, in terms of interacting with different ecosystems, I think most people have gravitated towards threshold signing as a more useful thing. Or if BLS multi-signatures are natively processed in other ecosystems. But even if it's like compatible with WARP messaging, you would then need to synchronize the P-chain validator set with other chains that want to support subnet messaging. Now, because of the generality of the message type, if you did that once, you should be able to support messages from any subnet. So if someone made that investment, like as an ecosystem, it could potentially be very useful in the long run if you like kind of have this high fixed cost, but the variable cost per message processed from other subnets is basically nothing. But it is a high fixed cost of like having some way to get that message information off the P-chain, because the P-chain doesn't actually produce like periodic signatures. Like you would have to somehow like we probably want to change the P chain to do that, which we've discussed with the multi-signature approach. But I would say in the short term and medium term, even warp messaging is really going to be more useful inside of the Avalanche ecosystem. And there's nothing particular about it that makes it very well suited for things outside of it because of the way that the signatures are verified. But obviously there's huge interest in finding ways to do that. And I think the short-term approach to that is threshold signatures. The medium-term approach is maybe trying to find some way to communicate the membership changes of the P chain so that people can validate those messages.
Yeah. And this literally wasn't a trick question. It's just like we wanted to validate what that meant when Gun said it. Yeah. Realistically speaking, we already have a good number of bridge providers. Layer Zero, for example, is a partner of Dexalot as well as Avalanche. So I just wanted to get a good sense of if that technology you guys just put together is available or useful for other people to sort of pick up.
Yeah, I mean, I think the one thing that it's really just the complexity of hooking up some sort of light client to the P chain, and that's really where it gets complicated. And the reason why, just to clarify, the reason why it does not work that way is that we get a lot of performance benefit from not including a bunch of signature and other overhead on Avalanche blocks, right? Like the P chain blocks are not signed by every validator. A lot of other ecosystems have signatures from every validator on like every block. So by not having like a signature aggregation part or like a part where we like go get signatures and then produce the block, right? When you produce your own block, you just send it out to the network and the people just start voting. Yep. So there's like a huge benefit from a time to finality perspective. So it's a game of trade-offs, right?
Absolutely. And anybody who would like to learn more about that last process that Patrick mentioned, I think the one that truly helped me conceptualize and understand this was from Snowflake to Avalanche by Gun Siraj, a very early video where, before Avalanche went live, he was describing the subsampling process and how like a consensus is reached between blue and red participants. We appreciate that answer. I think, there was a significant wealth of information in there, particularly because like we haven't done a lot of technical content here. We have done some, but I think this one is going to be very special for our audience. One other question that I'm not going to say a question that we've come across with in a conversation with another Avalabs person, Eric. He mentioned subnets potentially, being a service provided outside, for example. Like, is the SDK part of that plan, or like how do you guys view this? Because even though subnets are amazing technology, there is still going to be challenges where, for example, a gaming project full of game developers and game experts are still going to have a little bit of difficulty figuring out blockchain technology. And as you can imagine, subnets obviously are even further advanced and very base level information. How do you guys think about, subnets and potentially providing that, as a service to people who want to build on your amazing technology?
Yeah, I can't speak too specifically about this because we are naturally people want to almost think of subnets as like the cloud where they deploy something and then everything else kind of just happens for you. And so I think that there will be, a world of something like that where you almost could pick out components like an app store, and then you just click a few buttons and, you have your endpoints, you have your Explorer, and you're good to go regardless of what virtual machine you're running. So that's certainly an idea that I think would be interesting to people, but it really comes down to and this probably touches a bit on our partnership with AWS of actually working with their customer base and understanding what challenges they run into, is instead of working in the dark, we can get hands-on feedback frequently on what is missing from people trying to understand how to work with Avalanche and use Avalanche to close that gap. And so from that perspective, I think it's a really clear indicator of, really what people want that know nothing or care nothing about different blockchains. Is we've heard about this crypto native thing that makes it easier to do, other stuff, or give ownership back to the users that participate with something that's, internet native. But from that perspective, that's really all we know. And so how would we go from there? What are the trade-offs? And frankly, I think it took years for me to fully grasp all the different ways you could, and I'm still learning every day, right? Conceptualize connecting everything. So to believe that an enterprise can overnight become an expert in all these different things and like understanding the trade-offs is, I think, kind of a hilarious premise. And I think what's required is more so to like, you rely on the people you already trust, right? Like if you have a lot of business with AWS, you're going to trust their assessment that they've looked at a lot of stuff and then can, kind of help guide you on a path that, is compatible with what your business interests are or needs. But at the same time, we think we'll learn quite a bit from them on that. So really the story is on the technical level, the SDKs will really help level up that ability to contribute. And then on a more practical, like people-to-people perspective, it will be getting actual feedback from enterprises that are taking blockchain very seriously.
I was even like, again, I'm one of those weird guys. These are the types of things I sometimes think, but like custom VMs is something that is at the forefront of my mind because application-specific chains, I almost want to say for most high-throughput applications, there has to be a custom VM. So I was even envisioning a VM marketplace as a part of the service where you pick a generic EVM to launch something, or you have a move VM, or you have like all these different options that you can plug and play, drop, insert, and boom, your entire blockchain environment on which you're going to run and build your application is ready for you.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a huge opportunity for also the players in the ecosystem that are looking for, what do people want with subnets? I mean, It's pretty clear. Like, I want to run a virtual machine, and like I don't want to worry about it. So, like, if you can help me do that, many people find that very useful. Yeah,
Absolutely. Jimmy, how much time do I have?
We don't have a lot. I actually just wanted to jump in, Firestorm. Thank you for alerting me. I do want to open up to the chat if you have any questions for Patrick while he's here. I know he doesn't have a lot of time and we're pretty short. So if anybody's got any questions, I know we have a Dexalot specific question that we will answer coming up. But Firestorm will field that one. But I do want to shout out Guru WP _ great energy. Patrick, you are their hero. They have said in the chat, and let's show that on screen. You are my hero, and they have also said the power of the subnet has come when warp messaging is coming. Warp messaging, it's just so strong. Guru, I love your energy. Thank you for that. And Patrick, and also says hero to add that. Wow, you got a big fan in here, Patrick. So.
I mean, for me, it's like if I can just talk about subnets and in return people like mint me like really cool NFTs or like just post pictures of like stuff like that, I use it everywhere. I love the energy and like creativity of other people. That's one thing I just never been any good at is art related stuff. Like I feel like I'm much better. I can write code at least, but one thing I can't do is draw anything. So like if you have cool art, like I'm a huge fan always, and I actually have like multiple. What are they're called like infinite objects, like the digital things on my desk. Like I don't actually have like physical art, I just have like a ton of like kind of virtual pictures around me. But so like I love digital art and everything that people are doing there.
That's awesome, man. Our producer is with us right now, John, our producer. We should make a Patrick O'Grady emote for Twitch to honor him for coming to the show. Patrick, I just have two short questions before we let you go. I know you're a busy guy, but we would love to have you come back. The chat was so excited about this show, and I would love to see if you would be able to come back and talk to us sometime. Would you be open to coming back to In the CLOB with us and talk to our chat?
Yeah. I mean, if you prepare, stuff ahead of time, I can also prepare like longer kind of responses to certain topics and everything like that. But, today, actually, I think I can go a little bit long because I was already a little behind. So like, if there's anything else you guys want to talk about, I'm happy to do that. Yeah.
Actually, I have a question. So maybe you can touch on, so we hear from our founders all the time, what Dexalot is building just fits with Avalanche, right? And I guess we never hear kind of the other side of that. And so I was kind of interested, maybe you could talk about why Avalanche is perfect for what Dexalot is building. Because I think that would be very helpful for our viewers and our listeners. This will be available as a podcast on Spotify as well, chat, just so you guys know. But yeah, I thought you could speak to that.
Yeah. I mean, so, at a high level, right? Like the reason why I was so interested in Avalanche is the flexibility of the runtime. So I think for a lot of people, having the ability to just like deploy, I think I mentioned earlier, like a contract and something like that is a great way to start. And for a lot of applications that are like some applications, it never really makes sense to go further than that. It's okay just to have a contract that you interact with. But when you want to take it to the next level of like throughput on a decentralized application, there's just not really another way people have demonstrated you can achieve high performance rather than having like a dedicated platform to what you're doing. And people can even say like, oh, you can run WASM, you can whatever. Like I was looking at WASM benchmarks earlier today, and this is just generic stuff. And even the highest performance WASM things that people talk about, like can run native like code or whatever, like they're still 40 times slower than native code. So like, it's not like it's like the same thing, right? Like there's still a gap. As soon as you introduce generality, you make it slower, you make the throughput lower. And what that means for the average person, right, is it's just more expensive to use. So you can have less users, you can have less interaction, or the interactions you want are less useful. So you really, what you're trying to do is always optimize for performance. Like if you want people to do and interact in interesting ways, that's all that matters. And there's a number of strata that are important to optimize there. But people that are taking high throughput things and putting them somewhere else, and then only, having the interactions that need to interact with on a single place or like the C chain, for example, is the right way to think about it. And warp messaging should really help with that. So I think the vision for Avalanche is really what is kind of like similar to what Dexalot is trying to do, which is you'll have all these hyper-focused subnets. Like you'll have one subnet that is super focused on, transfers or something like that. You'll have one subnet that maybe, is really optimized for lending. And like when you have, 100 people using something, right? Like the optimization part doesn't matter. But if you're actually trying to grow the thing and have like 1 million people using it, it really matters really fast. And so if you have all these hyper optimized things, but then it's really easy to communicate between them, you can in aggregate have much more throughput and much more interaction with a single ecosystem than a single chain that may be much more generic. And so people may say like, okay, I get it, but like at a high level, but like what does that specifically mean? Well, let's just say like you have a very specific example of a virtual machine where you're just transferring. Now, if you were just transferring on a generic virtual machine, you may have some idea, or actually, let me give a different example. Let's say in your case of a CLOB, because we're talking about CLOBs, we're talking about Dexalot right now, right? In a generic virtual machine, if you were to do some sort of like state prefetching on a particular transaction that you were going to do. So like, let's say that I'm on Dexalot and I'm going to trade, my tokens for some other tokens. And I want to like, process this transaction as fast as possible. Well, one trick people will use, or virtual machines will use, is that they'll prefetch the state that you're going to touch so that when the virtual machine actually executes your transaction, it doesn't have to go look it up on disk, which will add dramatic amounts of latency and a high performance system. Well, building a generic virtual machine that is smart enough to know exactly what you're going to touch in a particular trade that is just generic for like smart contracting,
sure,
much more complicated.
Right.
not impossible, complicated.
Sure,
sure. Or maybe it requires a wallet to provide a bunch of additional information because it can't like look through the transaction because it doesn't know what's deployed there, or like the smart contracts, right?
Sure.
Well, if you have like a custom virtual machine, right, that's optimized singularly for performance, and you have a small set of like very well understood transactions, you probably know exactly what state you're going to touch.
Right.
So you could pre-execute everything or the entire block. So like that's just one small specific example of how, optimized virtual machines can make a huge difference just on a few practical considerations. And so when people talk about app chains and like subnets or app chains or side chains or like that, I think it really like undersells the goal here. And it's not an app chain. It's really like an optimized chain. And there's a big difference in how people receive that information. App chain makes it sound like a toy. Optimized chain makes it sound like a deliberate decision. Yeah.
Definitely. It's like a specific utility targeting chain, right? You basically identify that subset of utility specific for your application, and you provide the best possible way to provide that utility to the end users by using this technology. Now, I guess obviously lots is going in my head, but hearing you talk about these things, where do you rank Avalanche and the technology in terms of customizability among all the other blockchains out there? Obviously, I would love to hear that, because in my mind, I don't know everything out there, but as far as I know, that's like the top solution is Avalanche, because of the way the subnets work, because we can customize the VM and many other things. Yeah. What's your take on that?
So I mean, obviously I'm biased, right? I think Avalanche from a point is almost too customizable. So when you're trying to get started, there are almost too many levers to pull that people really get caught up in it. And so that's why I think the subnet EVM has been so popular, is because there's way fewer levers to pull. You're modifying a JSON with 15 lines, most people, right? As opposed to building something entirely from scratch. You can add precompiles and everything like that, but most people that deploy the EVM are not doing anything like that. And so when it comes to the customizability, right? Avalanche, the engine, is what orchestrates the subnet runtime, which we call the virtual machine, right? Or whatever you would run it on a chain. And all it does is it says, here's some bytes. Tell me if this is a block. Here's a block. Tell me if it's valid. Here's a block. Tell me if I should accept it or reject it. At the lowest level, that's all you have to implement. And then again, even then, you don't even have to implement that. You could just use the networking that is provided to the virtual machine runtime, and just send bytes between different things. I'm not aware of any other framework that that. I think that some you could kind of shoehorn it into that just really gives you every option to screw up. You can really do anything on top of it and do a lot of things unsafely. The engine provides certain invariants that it will honor. So we were not going to accept a block we haven't verified previously, which is really important, right? But if you don't track state correctly between different processing forks, you could definitely have the chain split, for example. So I think where we need to go as a community is start to really align on better generic abstractions that people can use for building. Because if it takes 100,000 lines of code to write your super specialized blockchain, this is never going to work, right? You have to get it down to something that's actually digestible from many people. But from a technology perspective, I think a lot of other projects are doing some really cool stuff, particularly with zero knowledge work. I think that's one area that I would really like to see more of on Avalanche. And I think the Rust SDK that we released should hopefully help spur that development. So from that perspective, I don't think we're a leader in zero knowledge tech by any means, but in terms of providing an approachable and flexible runtime to run a zero knowledge prover or something like that, I think that we're very well positioned. So the hope is that we can leverage that to start to attract a lot of those minds that hey, if you wanted to make a chain and all it did was verify zero knowledge proofs, I think that we're pretty well suited for that, as opposed to trying to write those proofs in Solidity and then verify them somehow. That just seems like a whole massive layer of additional complexity that you could totally avoid if you just built a subnet or a virtual machine that does that.
Amazing.
Yeah,
man.
I mean, go ahead, Firestorm.
I was just going to say our producer is probably dancing in his room right now, because there's so many good clips in there, Patrick.
Oh my God.
You have no idea. You just created hours and hours of content for us, and gems that we're going to provide our audience and the people. We really appreciate it. I just needed to say that.
And let me also say that, and for the chat, for all you guys have been watching, I see that we do have a question, but I think it's important to note that the way Patrick is explaining these high-level concepts, because take someone like me, right? I am not a crypto triple OG, right? I'm a DJ that's excited about Web3, and I did mean for that to rhyme. I'm corny like that. But if I can understand what Patrick is talking about, he's doing a great job explaining it, guys. And so that's what you can expect here on In the CLOB. It's season 2. And it looks like Jordan, who also asked a question that Firestorm is going to answer coming up, is asking us a question right now. Patrick, in terms of, let's just put this on screen for everybody. In terms of value accretion to AVAX from the launch of subnets, the main element is the requirement. So this is a validator question. Is that a question you can answer, Patrick?
Value accretion.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't think we're going to go there.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
I think, you know, I'm, as I've told people before, an engineer. Like, I'm very particularly focused on, you know, how to use like the network for.
This
really
is a question.
So I'll stay away from that
for the forums and the Discord. You're going to get a lot of opinions. You know, our guests are here with specific agendas. We have to promise them that we're not going to ask them about certain things. This is probably one of those things. We appreciate the
thanks for the question, Jordan. But we're going to steer clear of that one. We appreciate you joining the chat, though. And speaking of appreciation, Patrick, we really appreciate you coming to the show and talking to us today. This has been like like Firestorm said, I can't wait to clip all these clips, man. This is like, and it's a really fun conversation. It's been really fun having you on the show. But before you go, In the CLOB is not just a clever name. We have a DJ setup that we do. I get back on the turntables and do some DJing for us. And so before you go, I have to ask, is there a song that you'd like to hear me play to take us out at the end of the show? Do you have a request?
Ooh, let's see.
I don't mean to put you on the spot. If you don't have one, it's all good. I just like to, you know, put it out there for our guests, man.
So a song I've been listening to a lot lately, which is probably kind of more like a lot of the electronic a little bit more, is something. It's a song called Ripple featuring Flume and Chrome Sparks by Sicko, SYCCO, called Ripple. Super good. It should be on Spotify. It's not like super deep track or anything.
It's Sicko. What's the title of the song?
It's called Ripple.
Ripple.
It's featuring Flume, and I'll type it out in the chat.
No, I got it. Our producer is going to get it for. We got a whole system, Patrick. We got a great system worked out.
I gotta tell people, everyone around me is like a fantastic planner and like polisher of different things, and like I just show up to a lot of this stuff. So like people that have come into like Avalanche community events or anything, you know, even around Dexalot community, whatever, they're like, "Oh wow, like how'd you put this all together?" I'm like, I'm seeing this for the first time, just like all you guys are. Nothing to do with this. So, you know, I think people have different talents, and that's just not one of mine. But I'm happy to appreciate it. Yeah.
Well, we appreciate you being here, man, and dropping so much knowledge on us. This has been another show where an hour conversation just felt like about 10 minutes. So I hope we'll be able to have you come back and talk about more of the nuts and bolts of Avalanche. The chat was very excited to have you here. So yeah, man, it's been a pleasure, and we hope to see you again really soon.
We appreciate all the work you guys are putting in, and we really appreciate the support you guys have given Dexalot, and we'll look forward to continuing to work with you guys. Thank you so much for everything, dude.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for having me. I always love chatting about the random shower thoughts I have. Yeah,
let's go.
Thanks again, Patrick.
Yeah,
we appreciate you, man. Thank you so much.
See you later, man.